Daniel Brooks slammed his coffee cup down so hard the table jumped, stood up in the middle of a packed lunch rush, and pointed straight at the man laughing at the woman behind the counter. "Stop judging her." The whole diner went silent. Forks froze. Phones lowered. Somebody's chair scraped and stopped halfway. "You're judging the woman who just cooked the best meal you'll eat this year," Daniel said. "Maybe the problem isn't her body. Maybe it's your character." But here's what nobody in that room knew. Not the man he was shouting at, not the influencer filming it, not even Emily Carter herself. Daniel Brooks had a reason for standing up, and it had nothing to do with the food. Before we go on, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe kindness still matters, subscribe. This one's going to stay with you. 6 weeks earlier, Emily Carter unlocked the front door of her diner at 4:40 in the morning, the way she had every morning for 3 years. The lock stuck. It always stuck. She jiggled the key twice, leaned her shoulder into the door, and it gave. "Morning, Bess," she said to the coffee urn. The urn didn't answer. It never did. But Emily had learned a long time ago that a woman who lives alone either talks to her appliances or she stops talking altogether, and she wasn't ready to stop talking. She flipped the lights. She tied her apron. She pulled 12 pounds of chuck roast out of the walk-in and started trimming it for the Sunday pot roast that she made on a Tuesday, because Mr. Alvarez came in on Tuesdays and Sunday pot roast was the only thing he'd eaten since his wife passed. That was Emily Carter's whole life in one sentence if anybody had bothered to write it down. Nobody had. The first customer through the door at 6:15 was Walter Hodge, 78 years old, a retired steam fitter with a bad hip and worse manners in the morning. "You're late," he said. "I've been here since 4:45, Walt." "Coffee's late?" "Coffee's been ready since 5:30. "Then it's old." Emily set the mug in front of him. "It's fresh. I made a second pot when I heard your truck." Walter grumbled something into his collar and drank it. Then he drank the whole thing and held the mug back up without looking at her. "How's the hip?" she asked, pouring. "It's a hip." "Did you go to the appointment?" "Didn't need to." "Walt." "Emily. You promised me." "I promised you I'd think about it." "I thought about it." He looked at the counter. "Cost $200 just to walk in the door and have a kid half my age tell me I'm old." Emily set the pot down. She wiped her hands on her apron and she reached under the register and she pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the counter to him. "What's this?" "It's a coupon." Walter unfolded it. It was a receipt from the medical center on Halsted, paid in full with his name on it. He stared at it for a long moment. "Emily, they had a program," she said, "for seniors. I just filled out the paperwork." That was a lie. There was no program. There was $412 of Emily's rent money, and there was a receipt, and there was a woman who couldn't stand the thought of Walter Hodge falling down his basement stairs because he was too proud to spend money he didn't have. Walter folded the receipt very carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He didn't say thank you. He never said thank you. He said pot roast today. Pot roasts tomorrow. That's Mr. Alvarez. Then what have I got? You've got biscuits and gravy, and you've got a doctor's appointment on Thursday at 10, and I'll drive you. Walter looked up at her for the first time all morning. He had the kind of face that had been weathered by 50 years of cold pipe and hot solder, and it didn't move much. "You're a good egg kid," he said. "I'm a stubborn egg. Same thing most days." By 10:15, the diner had 11 people in it, which was a good morning, and Emily was moving the way she always moved, fast, light, quieter than a woman her size had any right to be. That's when the girl with the ring light came in. She was maybe 22. She had a phone on a little tripod, and she set it on the corner table, and she angled it, and Emily saw the angle, and Emily knew. She'd seen that angle before. "Hi there," Emily said. "Sit anywhere you like." "Oh, I'm good here." The girl smiled with her mouth. "Can I get what's the biggest thing on the menu?" "The biggest?" "Like the most food. The most possible food." Emily didn't blink. The lumberjack's 4 eggs, 6 strips of bacon, hash browns, and a short stack. That's the biggest. Perfect. And can you bring it out personally? There it was. Emily stood there with her pad in her hand and felt something old and familiar settle in her chest. Something heavy and quiet, like a stone dropped into a deep well. "Sure, honey," she said. "I'll bring it out personally." She went back to the kitchen. She cooked the eggs the way she cooked every egg butter low-heat patient. She laid the bacon out so it wouldn't curl. She flipped the pancakes when the bubbles came up and not 1 second before. And when she carried it out, the phone was recording, and the girl was already talking to it in that voice, that bright poison voice. "Okay, so we're at this little place, and I just want to say, you guys..." Emily set the plate down. "The portions here, I mean, look who's serving it right. That's how you know it's good." Somebody at the counter laughed. Emily heard it. She heard exactly who it was, too. It was a man in a good coat who'd been in 3 times that month and tipped 11% every time. The girl kept going. "Like I'm just saying, if she's the walking advertisement, you know the food is hitting." And here is the part nobody ever believed later when the story got told and retold. Emily smiled. She smiled, and she said, "Ketchup or hot sauce?" The girl blinked. "What?" "For your hash browns. Ketchup or hot sauce?" Ketchup?" "I'll bring it right out." Emily paused. "And honey, eat it while it's hot. I didn't cook that for a camera. I cooked it for you." She walked away. She got behind the counter, and she got the ketchup, and she brought it out, and she set it down gently, and she went back into the kitchen, and she stood by the walk-in cooler where nobody could see her, and she put both hands flat on the steel, and she breathed. Just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way her mother taught her when she was 9 years old, and came home from school with her lunchbox in the garbage and a nickname she'd carry for the rest of her life. Don't let them see it, baby. Don't ever let them see it. Because the second they see it, they own it. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist once fast. Then she went back out and asked table 4 if they wanted more coffee. The video went up that night. By Thursday, it had 400,000 views. Emily knew because a kid came in on Friday, ordered a coffee, drank 2 sips, filmed himself standing next to her, and left. Because a woman came in on Saturday and asked if she could get a picture with the meme lady. Because on Sunday, 3 teenagers came in, sat down, ordered nothing, and just watched her. Watched her. Like she was an exhibit. "Y'all want menus?" Emily asked. "We're good. Kitchen's open till 2. "We're good?" They stayed 40 minutes. Then they left, and one of them said loud enough on purpose, "Bro, that's her." And the door swung shut, and Emily stood there holding 3 menus. Nobody wanted. Walter Hodge was at the counter. "Sit down," he said. "I've got the fryer going." "Emily, sit down." She didn't sit down. She never sat down. Sitting down was for people who had somebody else to carry it. "Walt, I'm fine." "You're not fine." "I've been not fine since I was 9 years old," Emily said, and she caught herself and she laughed, and it came out wrong. "Sorry. That was I'm sorry. You want pie?" Walter Hodge looked at her for a long, long moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I want pie." It rained on the second Tuesday of October. Not a normal rain. A Chicago October rain, the kind that comes sideways off the lake and finds the gap in your collar and gets into your bones and stays there. The lunch rush was thin. Emily was cleaning the flat top when the bell over the door rang. She turned around. A man came in soaked to the skin, and he was holding the hand of a little girl in a yellow raincoat. And the man looked like he'd been awake for about 4 years. "Are you open?" he said. "Come in out of that," Emily said. "Sit anywhere." He sat at the booth by the window because that was the closest one, and Emily got the feeling he didn't have the strength to walk further. The little girl slid in across from him and put her hands in her lap and looked at the table. Emily brought 2 waters and a stack of napkins. "Dry off," she said. "You want coffee? Please, black. And for you, sweetheart, The little girl didn't answer. The man said, "She'll have a milk. Thank you." "She got a name?" He hesitated. "Lily. Lily. That's a beautiful name." Emily crouched down, and it wasn't easy for her to crouch, and she did it anyway, so she'd be level with the girl instead of looming over her. "Lily, I'm Emily. If you need anything, you just wave at me. You don't even have to say anything. Just wave. Deal." Lily didn't look up. Emily waited 3 full seconds. Then she stood up like nothing had happened at all and said, "Deal," and went and got the milk. She came back with the coffee and the milk and a menu, and the man said, "What's good?" "Everything's good," Emily said. "I made it." He almost smiled. Almost. "What's best?" he said. "Depends what kind of day you had." He looked at her, and Emily saw the whole thing right there in his face, the way she'd seen it in 1,000 faces across 3 years of a counter, the hollow under the eyes, the way his hands were around the coffee cup, like it was the only warm thing he'd touched all week. "That kind of day," she said. "Yeah." "Then you want the chicken and dumplings." "That's not on the menu." "It's not on the menu because I only make it when I feel like it, and I felt like it this morning." Emily tucked the pad in her apron. 2 bowls. The man opened his mouth to say something about the little girl. Emily could see it coming. "She won't eat, don't bother. She hasn't eaten right in weeks," and he closed his mouth again. 2 bowls, he said. His name was Daniel Brooks, and Emily didn't know that yet. What she knew was that when she set the bowl in front of the little girl looked at it and didn't move. And the father looked at the bowl like it was a bill he couldn't pay. Emily didn't say a word. She went back behind the counter. She rolled silverware. She did not watch them. That was the trick. That was the whole trick, 30 years in the making. You never watch them. You put it down and you walk away and you let the food do what the food does. 2 minutes. 3. Then very quietly, the little girl picked up her spoon. Daniel Brooks froze. Emily saw it in the reflection of the pie case, and she kept rolling silverware, and her hands were shaking. Lily took a bite. She chewed. She swallowed. She took another one. And her father put his hand over his mouth and turned his face toward the window, and his shoulders came apart once hard, and then he got them back under control. Emily rolled another fork, then another. She let him have it. She let that man have that minute all to himself because that was the only gift she had left to give, and she gave it. When Lily was halfway through the bowl, she said the first words she'd said inside that diner. "Daddy!" Daniel's head came up so fast it was almost violent. "Yeah, baby. Yeah, I'm here. It tastes like Mommy's." The whole diner didn't hear it. Only Emily heard it, because Emily heard everything at that counter. That was the job. Daniel Brooks looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said, and his voice came out in pieces. "Yeah, it kind of does." "Tch." He came up to pay, and his eyes were red, and he wasn't pretending they weren't. "How much?" $11.40. He put down a 20. "Keep it." "That's too much." "Ma'am." "It's $11.40 and the tip line's right there, and if you want to put $2 on it, I'll take $2, but I'm not taking 9. Emily counted out his change and put it in his hand and closed his fingers around it. "You got a little girl to feed." Daniel Brooks stood there holding $8.60. "You don't know anything about me," he said. "Nope." "Then why'd you make her the chicken and dumplings?" "Because you had that face." "What face?" Emily leaned on the counter. "The face that says you've been holding a whole house up by yourself and your arms are giving out," she said. "I've seen it before, mister. My mother had it for 11 years. Daniel Brooks didn't answer. "Come back Saturday," Emily said. "I do biscuits on Saturday. Little ones like her go crazy for the biscuits." He looked at her. Really looked, and Emily braced for it because she knew what came next. She always knew what came next. The flick of the eyes down and up the little recalculation. It didn't come. He said, "What's your name?" "Emily." "Daniel," he said. "That's Lily." I know, she told me. Daniel Brooks blinked. She told you. She waved at me, Emily said. When you were in the restroom, she waved and I came over and she asked if the dumplings had onions in them because onions are gross, and I said there were onions, but I chopped them so small they don't count, and she said that was probably okay. Daniel Brooks stood absolutely still. She hasn't talked to a stranger since her mother died, he said. Well, Emily said, I'm not a stranger. I'm the dumpling lady. And behind her father's legs, Lily Brooks laughed. It was a small laugh. It was barely anything. Daniel Brooks put his hand on the counter to hold himself up. They came back Saturday. They came back the Saturday after that. By the third week, Lily had her own stool at the counter and her own job, which was stacking sugar packets into a tower and knocking it down. And by the fourth week, she had a second job, which was telling Emily everything. Emily, my dad burned the eggs. Did he? He always burns the eggs. He puts the fire on the highest. Lily, Daniel said. He does. He puts it on 10. Emily, what number do you put it on? 4, Emily said. 4. Eggs are a patient food, honey. You rush an egg, the egg gets even. Lily turned around on her stool. Dad, 4. I heard her. You put it on 10. I heard her, Lil. And Emily laughed and Daniel laughed, and it was the first time she'd heard the sound out of him, and it was rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in a long time. He told her eventually. Not all at once. Men like Daniel Brooks never tell it all at once. They tell it in pieces over months at a counter at 7 in the morning, in the gaps between the coffee. His wife's name was Sarah. It was a car on the Kennedy in February, and it wasn't anybody's fault, and that was somehow the worst part, that there was nobody to be angry at. Lily stopped talking for 9 weeks. He'd taken her to 4 different restaurants, and she wouldn't eat, and he'd cooked her 400 different dinners, and she wouldn't eat, and he was a man who fixed things for a living. He was a foreman. He ran a crew of 19, and he could not fix his own daughter, and it was killing him by inches. And then she ate your dumplings, he said. Kids eat. She hadn't eaten in 9 weeks, Emily. She'd eaten, just not enough. Not the way you want. Don't do that. Do what? Make it small, Daniel said. You do that. Every time I try to say something to you, you make it small. Emily wiped the counter. Habit, she said. He started noticing things after that. He noticed the way the man in the good coat looked her up and down when she walked past, then looked at his friend, then did the little thing with his eyebrows. He noticed the teenagers who came in and ordered nothing. He noticed that when Emily walked out from behind the counter, she took the long way around the room, the way that kept the counter between her and most of the tables, and he noticed that she'd been doing it so long, she probably didn't know she did it. He noticed a kid film her from the doorway on a Tuesday and run. And he noticed that Emily Carter, who fed Walter Hodge's blood pressure medication money out of her own register and who kept a card table in the back for Mr. Alvarez to sit at because he didn't like to eat alone, and who had a whole shelf of coats she'd bought for people who came in cold. Emily Carter apologized. Constantly. For nothing. Sorry, let me squeeze by. Sorry, I know I'm in the way. Sorry, 1 second, sorry. Why do you do that? Daniel said one morning. Do what? Say sorry. You said it 4 times in 10 minutes. You didn't do anything. Emily stopped with the pot in her hand. And for 1 second, just one, the thing came up out of the well. Because it's easier if I say it first, she said. Then she filled his cup and moved on down the counter and asked table 6 if they wanted whipped cream. Daniel Brooks sat there and looked at his coffee for a very long time. 2 weeks later, at 12:40 on a Friday, in the middle of the busiest lunch rush of the month, a man in a good coat pushed his plate away and said loud to his table, "You know what I lost my appetite?" His friend laughed. Emily was 6 feet away, with a bus tub on her hip. "Something wrong with it, sir." "Nothing's wrong with it." The man wiped his mouth and dropped the napkin on the plate. "It's just hard to work up an appetite in here, you know, given the, He gestured vaguely at all of the presentation. The table laughed, all four of them. Somebody at the counter snorted into their coffee, and Emily Carter said, "I'll get you a box, hon." She said it kindly. She said it kindly, and she started to turn away. And that was the exact thing that made Daniel Brooks put his cup down. Because she wasn't even hurt. She was used to it. 29 years of practice had made her so good at it that she could take it without flinching. Smile and offer that man a to-go box. And Daniel Brooks understood in that half-second that this had been happening to her every single day of her entire life, and that not one person, not one had ever stood up. The bus tub was on her hip. She was turning away, and Daniel Brooks slammed his coffee cup down so hard the table jumped and stood up in the middle of a packed lunch rush and pointed straight at the man in the good coat. "Stop judging her." The whole diner went silent. Emily froze with the bus tub on her hip. "You're judging the woman who just cooked the best meal you'll eat this year," Daniel said, and his voice was not loud anymore, and somehow that was worse. "Maybe the problem isn't her body. Maybe it's your character." Nobody moved. Somewhere in the back, a phone came up and started recording, and Emily Carter stood in the middle of her own diner, holding a tub of dirty dishes, and felt something crack open in her chest that she had spent 29 years welding shut. 12:41 on a Friday afternoon, and nobody in that diner was breathing. The man in the good coat looked at Daniel Brooks the way a man looks at a dog that has just come off its chain. Confused first, then insulted, then very fast angry. "Excuse me? You heard me." "I don't think I did." "Then I'll say it again," Daniel said. Slower. His friend at the table made a sound, half a laugh, and it died in his throat when nobody else joined him. Emily still hadn't moved. The bus tub was on her hip, and her arm was starting to shake, and she couldn't put it down, because putting it down would mean this was happening, and if she just stood very still, maybe it would pass over her the way everything else had ever passed over her. "Sit down, buddy," the man in the coat said. "No." "Sit down." "I said no." "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene," Daniel repeated. "That's what you got out of this, that I'm making the scene. You're standing in a restaurant screaming at a stranger. You're sitting in a restaurant insulting a woman who just fed you for $9.40. Daniel picked up the man's plate. He picked it right up off the table. "You ate the whole thing. Put that down. You ate every bite of it. You cleaned it. There's a bread mark where you wiped the plate." Daniel turned the plate around so the whole room could see it. "Look at it. That's a clean plate. That's a man who liked his lunch." "Sir," Emily said. "You don't get to eat her food and then say that to her face," Daniel said. "You don't get to do both." "I'll say whatever You can," Daniel said. "Sure, you can. Nobody's stopping you. That's been the whole problem for about 30 years, near as I can tell. Nobody has ever once stopped you." And that was the sentence that did it. Because Emily Carter, standing there with a tub of dirty dishes on her hip in the middle of her own diner, heard 30 years and understood in one horrible bright flash that he had been watching her, that he had noticed, that every single time she took the long way around a table, every time she said sorry for nothing, every time she smiled and offered a to-go box to a man who'd just called her disgusting in front of 40 people, Daniel Brooks had been sitting at her counter with his coffee and had been counting. The bus tub slipped. It hit the floor, and it did not break because it was plastic, but every plate in it broke all at once, a sound like a car wreck. 12:42. Nobody said anything. Emily looked down at the mess. She looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. Then she said very quietly, "Everybody's food's getting cold." That was it. That was all she had. "Emily," Daniel said. "The food's getting cold, Daniel." She crouched down and started picking up the pieces with her bare hands. And the man in the good coat, who could have let it go, who had exactly 1 second to be a person, said, "Careful bending down, sweetheart. You'll..." He never got to the end of it. Because Walter Hodge, 78 years old, bad hip retired steam fitter, put both hands flat on the counter and pushed himself up off that stool, and it hurt him to do it. And everybody in the room could see that it hurt him to do it, and he did it anyway. "Say the rest of it," Walter said. The man in the coat blinked. "What?" "Say the rest of the sentence. You started it. Finish it." "I don't." "Finish it," Walter said. He wasn't loud. He was 78. He didn't have loud anymore. But there was something in the way an old man stands up when standing up costs him something, and the whole room felt it. The man in the coat did not finish the sentence. "That's what I figured," Walter said. He came around the end of the counter, slow, one hand on the edge for balance, and he got himself down onto his knees on that tile floor, and it took him about 11 seconds, and nobody helped him because nobody dared. He started picking up broken plates. "Walt," Emily said. "Walt, get up. Walt your hip." "Shut up, kid." "Walter." "I said shut up." His hands were shaking. He had a piece of a coffee saucer in his fingers, and he was 78, and his hip was screaming, and he was on the floor of a diner picking up broken dishes next to a woman who'd paid for his doctor's appointment out of her rent money and lied about it. 12:44. The girl at table 3 stood up. She was maybe 30. Emily didn't know her name. She'd been in maybe 4 times. She walked over and she got down on the floor and she started picking up plates. Then the guy from table 6. Then the 2 women who came in every Friday and split a Reuben. Then Mr. Alvarez, 81 years old, who had not spoken more than 9 words in that diner in 3 years, who came over and got down on the floor with the rest of them, and said in his accent without looking up at anybody, "She feeds us." That was all he said. Emily Carter, on her knees on her own floor, surrounded by 6 people picking up her broken plates, put her hand over her face. "Don't," she said. "Please don't. Please, everybody. Please, just please sit down. Please, I'm fine. I'm fine." Nobody sat down. "Please," Emily said, and her voice broke clean in half. "Please, I'm asking you. Please sit down. I don't know what to do when people are nice to me. I don't know how. I don't know how." And the whole room heard it. 12:45. The man in the good coat put $40 on the table and walked out, and the bell over the door rang behind him, and nobody watched him go. His friends went too, all 3 of them. One of them said sorry to nobody in particular into his own collar on the way past. The door shut, and Emily Carter knelt on the floor of her diner and cried for the first time in front of another human being since she was 9 years old, and Walter Hodge, 78, put his shaking hand on her shoulder and said, There it is, kid. Let it go." She cried for about 90 seconds. Then she stood up, wiped her face with her apron, said, "Who needs coffee?" and went and got the pot. Because that was Emily Carter, and 90 seconds was all she'd ever allowed herself, and she wasn't about to start now. 12:52, and the diner was almost normal again, except it wasn't because everybody in there had watched a woman come apart and put herself back together in front of them, and you don't unwatch a thing like that. Daniel Brooks was still standing. "Sit down," Emily said, filling his cup. "Emily." "Sit down, Daniel." He sat down. She poured. Her hand was steady. That was the part he couldn't get over later, that her hand was completely steady. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yeah, I did." "No, you didn't." She set the pot on the burner. "You know what happens now. He goes home. He gets on his phone. And by tonight there's a review that says the owner assaulted a customer, and by Monday there's 40 of them, and there's a picture of me in it. And you know what? The picture's gonna be of Daniel. It's not gonna be of my face." Daniel didn't say anything. "That's what happens," Emily said. "That's what always happens. You didn't defend me. You just made it more expensive." "Then it's more expensive." "That's easy for you to say." "You're right," Daniel said. "It is." Emily stopped. "It's easy for me to say," he said. "I know that. I've got a job and a truck and a face nobody films. I know exactly what it cost you and exactly what it cost me, and they're not the same number, and I'm not going to pretend they are." He turned the cup around on the counter. "But I'd do it again in about a half second, so." "Why?" "Because my kid was watching." Emily looked at him. Not today, Daniel said. Today she's at her grandma's. But she's watching Emily. She's always watching. She's 6, and she's already learning what a person's supposed to do when somebody gets treated like that in front of them. And for 8 months the only thing I've taught her is that her dad sits there and drinks his coffee. 12:56. That's not fair to you, Emily said. It's completely fair to me. Daniel, I sat here for 6 weeks, he said. 6 weeks, Emily. I watched a kid film you from the doorway and run, and I sat here. I watched 3 teenagers sit at table 2 for 40 minutes and order nothing and stare at you like you were in a zoo. And I sat here. I watched you take the long way around the room every single time, and I sat here. Because it wasn't my business. Because I didn't want to make it weird. Because you seemed like you were handling it. He looked up. You weren't handling it. You were just used to it. Those aren't the same thing, and I knew they weren't, and I sat here anyway. Emily put both hands on the counter. You want to know the worst part, Daniel said. You fed my daughter. She hadn't eaten in 9 weeks, and you fed her, and you didn't make me say thank you, and you didn't make it a big thing, and you gave me my $9 back, and told me I had a little girl to feed. And then I sat at your counter for 6 weeks and watched people do that to you, and I didn't say one word. Daniel, so no, he said. It wasn't for you. Don't thank me. It was for me. I've been a coward in this room since October, and I got tired of it. The diner was quiet. Emily reached under the counter and got a piece of pie and put it in front of him and said, Eat that. I'm not hungry. Eat that, Daniel. He ate it. 1 o'clock, and Walter Hodge said from 4 stools down without turning around, He's right, you know. Nobody asked you, Walt. Nobody ever does. Walter drank his coffee. Doesn't stop me. At 2:15, the first review went up. Emily saw it because a customer showed her, which was somehow worse than finding it herself. 3 sentences. It said the owner was unsanitary. It said the owner made customers uncomfortable. It said there was an incident and the staff was aggressive. There was no staff. There had never been staff. There was Emily and a dishwasher named Ronnie who came in at 4. By 6 o'clock, there were 9 reviews. By 10 o'clock, there were 31. Emily sat in the back at the little card table she kept for Mr. Alvarez and scrolled through her phone, and the screen light was the only light in the building, and she read every single one. Not one of them was about the food. At 11:40, her phone rang. Emily, it's Daniel. How'd you get this number? It's on your window. Right. She laughed, and it came out wrong the way it always came out wrong. Right. It's on my window. You okay? Sure. Emily. There's 31, she said. The line was quiet. There's 31 of them, and there's a picture, and it's exactly the picture I said it was going to be, Emily said. It's from the video. The girl with the ring light. Somebody screenshotted it, and now it's the top result, and it's Daniel. It's me. It's my face. It's my actual face on there, and I'm smiling in it. I'm smiling because I just asked her ketchup or hot sauce, and she was laughing at me, and I was smiling. Emily. I need to go. Don't hang up. I need to go, Daniel. She hung up. 11:52, and Emily Carter sat alone in the dark at a card table in the back of her own diner, and did the thing she had not done since her mother's funeral, which was fall completely apart, with nobody there to see it, because that was the only way she knew how. At 6:15 Saturday morning, she unlocked the front door. The lock stuck. She jiggled the key twice, leaned her shoulder into it, and it gave. Morning, Bess, she said to the coffee urn. She flipped the lights, and she stopped, because Walter Hodge was already sitting at the counter. Inside, in the dark, in a locked building. Walt, how the hell did you... Ronnie let me in at 5. Ronnie doesn't come in till 4 in the afternoon. Ronnie came in at 5 this morning, Walter said. Ronnie's in the back. Why is Ronnie in the back? Because I called him, Walter said, and I told him to be here. Emily stood in her doorway with her keys in her hand. Walt, what did you do? I made some calls, Walter said. What does that mean? It means I'm 78 years old, and I got a lot of phone numbers and not a lot to do. At 6:20, the bell rang. It was one of the women who split the Reuben. At 6:30, it rang again. Mr. Alvarez, an hour early, in a jacket. Emily had never seen a good one, the kind a man saves. At 6:40 it rang, and it was the girl from table 3, the one who'd gotten on the floor, and she had 2 other people with her. At 7, it rang, and it kept ringing. By 7:15, there were 19 people in a diner that seated 34 at a time of day, when Emily Carter had never in 3 years served more than 6. "Walt," Emily said. "Walt, what is this?" "It's breakfast," Walter said. "Walter Hodge, what did you do?" Walter Hodge turned around on his stool slow because of the hip. "You want to know what I did," he said. "Fine, I'll tell you. Yesterday, I watched a man in a $400 coat make you apologize for existing in your own building, and then I watched a whole room full of grown adults sit on their hands, myself included, until some guy who's known you 6 weeks had the guts to stand up." He pointed at her with a shaking finger. "I've been coming in here for 3 years, kid. 3 years. Every day. You've been feeding me. You've been feeding all of us. And I sat on my hands." "Walt?" "So I made some calls," he said. "That's what I did. I called every son of a bitch I've known for 50 years, and I said there's a place on the corner, and there's a girl in it, and she's in trouble. And if you ever want to sit next to me again at a funeral, you'll be there at 7. The diner was full of people looking at their coffee. "Now make me some eggs," Walter said, "and put the fire on 4. Emily Carter stood in the middle of her own diner at 7:16 on a Saturday morning and could not speak. At 7:40 the bell rang, and it was Daniel Brooks and Lily. Lily saw the crowd and stopped dead in the doorway and grabbed her father's leg. "Daddy, where's my stool?" "I don't know, Lil." "Somebody's on my stool." And a man Emily had never seen in her life, 60-something gray crew cut, took one look at the little girl and got up off the corner stool and said, "This yours?" Lily nodded. "My apologies," the man said, and moved down one. At 8:10, Emily was running eggs, and she had never in her life run eggs for this many people alone, and Ronnie was on the flat top, which Ronnie had never done because Ronnie was a dishwasher. "Ronnie, you can't cook." "I've watched you do it 4,000 times." "Ronnie, 4. 4 right, the fire goes on 4. "How do you know that?" "The kid told me," Ronnie said, and jerked his chin at Lily, who was standing on her stool, directing traffic like a 6-year-old air marshal. At 8:35, a phone came up. Emily saw it out of the corner of her eye, and her whole body went cold, and she thought, "Here it is, here we go. They found me," and she felt the old thing come up out of the well, and she braced. The phone was Walter Hodge's. Walter Hodge, 78, was standing on the floor of the diner with his reading glasses down his nose, holding a phone at arm's length, like it might bite him recording. "Walt, what are you doing?" "I'm making a video," Walter said. "You don't know how to make a video." "The girl at table 3's helping me." "Walter." "Hush." He cleared his throat. He looked at the phone. He was terrible at it. He was holding it sideways. "My name's Walter Hodge," he said. "I worked 41 years as a steam fitter in this city. My wife's been dead 6 years. I eat every meal I get in this building." Emily said, "Walt, stop." "Yesterday a man came in here," Walter said to the phone, "and he ate a plate of this woman's food, and he cleaned that plate, and then he told her she was hard to look at, and she offered him a to-go box." "Walt, and then he went home," Walter said, "and he put a review on the internet, and 30 of his friends put reviews on the internet, and not one of them said one word about the food." The whole diner had gone quiet. "So here's mine," Walter said. "Here's my review. Emily Carter paid $412 out of her own pocket for my hip. She lied about it. She said there was a program. There's no program. I checked." Emily's hand went over her mouth. "She's got a shelf of coats in the back she buys for people who come in cold. She keeps a card table for a man who don't like to eat alone. She's 29 years old, and she works from 4:45 in the morning till 9 at night 6 days a week by herself. and she has never once in 3 years let me pay for a cup of coffee on a day I was low." Walter looked up from the phone. "And I've never said thank you," he said. "Not one time, in 3 years." He looked right at her. "Thank you," Walter Hodge said. And then he handed the phone to the girl at table 3 and sat down and picked up his fork and said, "These eggs are cold," and started eating. 8:41 on a Saturday morning. Emily Carter went into the walk-in cooler and shut the door and stood in the cold in the dark with her hands flat on the steel. At 9 o'clock, Daniel found her. She was still in there. The door was cracked. He didn't come in. "You gonna freeze to death in there?" "Working on it. 19 people out there want eggs." 22, Emily said. 3 more came in. "You counted through the door." "I count everything, Daniel. That's the job." He stood in the doorway. "He put it on the internet," Emily said. "I know." "He put it on the internet, Daniel. He put my rent money on the internet. He told everybody I—" She stopped. "Everybody's gonna know I lied." "About what?" "About the program. About there being a program. Walter's gonna know there was no program." "Emily," Daniel said. "Walter's known there was no program since the day you handed him that receipt." She turned around. "He's a steam fitter," Daniel said. "He read blueprints for 41 years. You think that man can't read a receipt?" Emily Carter stood in a walk-in cooler in the dark and put her hand over her eyes. He knew. Everybody knew Emily, Daniel said very gently. "Everybody has always known. You're the only person in that room who ever thought you were getting away with anything." At 9:15, she came out and made 22 breakfasts, and she did not sit down once. By noon, there were 41 people through the door. By 2, there were 60. At 4:30, the girl at table 3 came up to the counter with her phone, and she was pale. "Emily." "Not now, hun, I've got—" "Emily, you need to look at this." "I've got a ticket rail 6 deep." "Emily." Emily looked. Walter Hodge's video had 211,000 views. "That's not possible," Emily said. "It's been 8 hours." "That's not possible. Walter doesn't have an account. Walter doesn't know what an account is." "He doesn't," the girl said. "I do." Emily looked at her. "I'm sorry," the girl said. "I should have asked. I know I should have asked. I had 11,000 followers, and I've never posted anything that mattered in my whole life, and I watched a 78-year-old man say thank you to you, and I—" "How many?" 211,000, as of 90 seconds ago." At 4:42, the phone on the wall rang, the old one, the one that only rang when the ticket rail was full. Carter's. "Hi, is this Emily Carter?" "Speaking. My name's Priya Raghunathan. I'm a segment producer with Chicago's Table, the competition on Channel—" "I know what it is." "Great. So, we've got a call-in round for amateur cooks, and honestly, I don't do this. I never do this. But I watched a video this morning of an old man crying about your pot roast, and I've been on the phone with my EP for 3 hours and—" "No." There was a pause. "I'm sorry." "No," Emily said. "Thank you, no." "Ms. Carter, I don't think you understand what I'm—" "I understand exactly what you're offering," Emily said. "You want to put me on television." "Yes, ma'am," Emily said. "I have been on the internet for 1 day, and there are 31 reviews about how I look and a picture of me smiling while a girl called me a walking advertisement. You want to put me on television." "Ms. Carter." "Thank you for calling," Emily said, and hung up. 4:44. The whole diner had heard it. Nobody said anything. Not Walter, not Daniel, not Ronnie. 60 people in a room, and not one of them made a sound, because they'd all watched her come apart the day before, and there wasn't a person in there with the standing to tell her she was wrong. Except one. Lily Brooks, 6 years old, standing on her stool at the corner of the counter, said, "Why?" Emily turned around. "What, honey? Why did you say no?" "It's complicated, sweetheart." "But you're the best," Lily said. "Lil," Daniel said. "Leave it." "But she is." Lily looked around the diner at all of them, at 60 adults with the terrible clear eyes of a child who has not yet learned what the rules are. She's the best one. Everybody knows she's the best one. That's why everybody's here. Lily, Daniel said again. Then why doesn't she go? And Emily Carter opened her mouth to say something kind, something small, something that would make it go away. And Lily Brooks said, "Are you scared?" The diner did not make a sound. Emily Carter stood behind her own counter with a ticket rail 6 deep and 60 people watching and a 6-year-old girl standing on a stool looking at her. "Yeah," Emily said. "Yeah, baby. I'm scared." Lily thought about that for a second. Then she said, "But you're not scared here. This is different." "Why?" "Because here I know everybody." "So?" Lily said. "You didn't know me. You made me the dumplings anyway." And something in Emily Carter's chest, some rivet that had held for 20 years, sheared clean off. 4:48. Emily reached over and picked up the wall phone and looked at the number still on the screen, and Walter Hodge said, "Kid." "Don't, Walt." "I wasn't going to say don't." He set his fork down. "I was going to say when you get up there, put the fire on 4. Emily Carter laughed. Then she hit the button. It rang twice. "Priya Raghunathan. This is Emily Carter," Emily said, and her voice was shaking so hard she could barely get it out, and she got it out anyway. "You call back here in 10 minutes, and I'll have hung up again. So ask me right now while I've still got it." There was a beat of silence on the line. Then Priya Raghunathan said very carefully, "Ms. Carter, would you like to compete on Chicago's table?" And 60 people in a diner on the corner watched a woman who had apologized for her own existence, every day of her entire life, stand behind her counter with a ticket rail 6 deep and say, "Yes." The taping was in 11 days, and Emily Carter spent the first 3 of them convinced she'd made the worst mistake of her life. "I can't do it," she told Daniel on Monday morning over the counter at 6:15 with nobody else in yet. "You can do it." I called them back, Daniel. I said yes. And I've been up since 3 in the morning and I can't. I keep seeing it. The lights, the people, everybody looking at me and thinking the same thing they always think before they even... Emily, I'm going to pull out. You're not going to pull out. I'm going to call that Priya woman and I'm going to say I got sick. Daniel put his coffee down. "You know what my wife used to say," he said. Emily stopped. He didn't talk about Sarah. In 4 months he'd mentioned her maybe 6 times, and every one of them had cost him something. Emily knew it. She went still. She used to say, "The scared feeling and the ready feeling are the exact same feeling," Daniel said. "Same thing in your chest, same everything. The only difference is what you do next." He turned the cup around. "She said cowards call it scared so they've got permission to sit down, and brave people call it ready and they stand up. Same feeling. Different name. You get to pick the name." Emily looked at him. "That's a lot of pressure to put on a name," she said. "Yeah, well..." Daniel almost smiled. She was a lot of woman. 6:20 on a Monday, and Emily Carter wiped the counter and said quiet, "Okay." "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll pick ready." "Good. But I'm telling you right now, Daniel, if I get up there and freeze, if I get up there, and I can't move because everybody's looking, then Lily's gonna be in the front row," Daniel said, holding a sign, "and you look at her and you cook for her. That's it. You don't cook for the judges. You don't cook for the cameras. You cook for the one 6-year-old who ate your dumplings after 9 weeks of nothing. You've done it before. You do it again." Emily's eyes filled. "Don't," she said. "I've got prep." Wednesday, the practice started. Walter Hodge appointed himself without asking anyone the head of what he called the committee. The committee met at the diner after close, and it consisted of Walter Mr. Alvarez, the girl from table 3, whose name it turned out was Danny, which caused approximately 40 minutes of confusion. The first night Ronnie and the 2 women who split the Reuben, who were named Carol and Fran, and who had it emerged been eating in that diner since before Emily bought it. "You had it under the old owner," Emily said. "Sweetheart," Carol said, "we had it under the owner before him." This corner's had a diner on it since 1971. You're the fourth." "You never told me that." "You never asked," Fran said. "You were always running." Wednesday night, 9:40, and Emily plated a dish for the committee and set it down and folded her hands and waited to be told it was wrong. Nobody said anything. Walter took a bite. He chewed. He set his fork down. "What is that?" "It's braised short rib over No," Walter said. "What is that? Where'd it come from?" Emily faltered. "I made it up, for the show. They said, do something impressive, so I looked up what real chefs—" "Stop," Walter said. "Walt, it's got a red wine reduction. It's terrible," Walter said. The whole committee turned to look at him. "It's not terrible," Carol said. Carol. "It's terrible," Walter said, "because it ain't hers. Taste it, anybody. Taste it and tell me that's the same woman who made me pot roast on a Tuesday for 3 years because I couldn't eat it any other day." He pushed the plate away. "This is a woman doing an impression of somebody she thinks is better than her. And there ain't nobody better than her, so it don't work." Emily stood there. "Walt," she said, "you make chicken and dumplings that stopped a grieving child from starving to death," Walter said. "And you're gonna go on television and cook red wine reduction because some producer told you to be impressive. You want to be impressive? Cook the dumplings. Cook the thing that's true. That's the only impressive thing you've got, and it's the most impressive thing in this whole city, and you keep trying to throw it away." 9:48 on a Wednesday night, and Emily Carter sat down at her own counter, which she never did, and put her head in her hands. "They're gonna laugh at me," she said. "If I get up there with chicken and dumplings, comfort food, grandma food, they're gonna—" "Let 'em laugh," Walter said. "They laughed at the diner. Now they line up outside it." Mr. Alvarez, who almost never spoke, put his hand flat on the counter. "My wife," he said. 41 years. She made one thing. Arroz con pollo. One thing her whole life." He looked at Emily. "When she died, I could not eat. 9 months. Then I walk past your window, and I smell your kitchen, and I come in, and you make me the pot roast, and I think this is not her food. But it is her love. It is the same love. I taste the same love." He tapped the counter. "That is what you cook, mija. You do not cook chicken. You cook love. You go on the television, and you cook love, and let them try to score it." The diner was silent. Emily Carter looked at an 81-year-old man who had just said more words than she'd heard from him in 3 years combined. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, the dumplings. Friday. 4 days out." And the doubt came back at 3 in the morning, the way it always did. But this time, she didn't call anybody. She got up, and she went to the diner in the dark, and she made a pot of chicken and dumplings for nobody, just to feel her hands do the thing they knew how to do. And when the sun came up, Daniel was standing at the window with Lily on his shoulders because they'd been driving past to drop Lily at school and saw the light on. "You're here early?" Emily said, letting them in. "You're here earlier," Daniel said. Lily climbed onto her stool. "Is that the dumplings?" "It's the dumplings, baby." "Can I have some? It's 6 in the morning." "So." Emily laughed and got her a bowl, and Lily ate the whole thing and said, "This is the one you should make on TV." And Emily said, "That's the plan, honey." And Lily said, "Good, because the red wine one was gross." And Daniel choked on his coffee. "You gave her the red wine one." "She was here Wednesday. She's 6. She has excellent palate," Emily said with great dignity, and Lily nodded like this was well-established fact. 10 days after the phone call the night before the taping, Emily couldn't sleep, and neither, it turned out, could anybody else. At 9 p.m. the diner was full again, but not with customers. It was the committee, and it was Daniel and Lily, and it was the 60-something man with the gray crew cut who'd given up his stool, whose name was Earl. And who was it? Turned out Walter's friend from the Union Hall, and who had shown up every single day since. It was Danny from Table 3, and it was 3 of Danny's followers who'd driven in from the suburbs after the video. And it was a young cook named Marcus who worked the line at a place downtown and had seen Walter's video and come in on his day off to say the food changed how he thought about food. Emily stood behind her counter and looked at all of them. "What is this?" she said. "It's a send-off," Carol said. "I'm not going to war." "Feels like it," Fran said. 9:15 and Walter Hodge stood up slow because of the hip. "I'm going to say something," he announced. "God help us," Ronnie said. "Shut up, Ronnie." Walter cleared his throat. "Tomorrow this girl's going to go on the television and cook against people who went to school for it. People with knives that cost more than my truck. People who've been on TV before and know where to look and how to smile." He paused. "And I want her to remember one thing. You listening, kid?" Emily nodded. "Every one of those people learned to cook so people would clap," Walter said. "You learned to cook so people wouldn't be alone. That ain't the same thing. That ain't even close to the same thing. And when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the last bite and the last score, love beats technique. It always has. It's just that most people never get to see the two of them put in a room together and made to fight." He raised his coffee. "Tomorrow they're going to get to see it. Go show 'em." 9:16, and the whole diner raised whatever they were holding. Coffee and water and Lily's chocolate milk. And Emily Carter stood behind her counter and did not cry, because she had cried enough this month to last her the rest of her life. And instead she said, "I love you people," which she had never said to anyone out loud since her mother died. The taping was at a studio on the near west side, and Emily's call time was 8 a.m., and she got there at 6:40 because she didn't know how to be late to anything. Priya Raghunathan met her at the door. She was younger than Emily expected and more tired, and she took one look at Emily's face and said, "You want to run, don't you?" "A little. Everybody wants to run. Come here." She walked Emily down a hall. "Here's what I'm not supposed to tell you. You ready? I'm not supposed to tell you this." "Okay. There are 12 contestants today. 8 of them own restaurants. 2 of them have cookbooks. One of them was on a national show last year and lost in the finale and is very, very angry about it and is here for blood." Priya stopped walking. "And then there's you. And every single person who works on this show watched an old man cry about your pot roast, and we have gotten more mail about you in 10 days than we got all last season, and the network is watching this episode specifically because of you." She looked at Emily. "So, no pressure. But also, you're not the underdog they think you are. You're the reason they're all here. Don't let anybody in that room tell you different." 8:10 a.m., and Emily Carter walked onto a soundstage for the first time in her life. The lights were exactly as bad as she'd feared. The other contestants were already at their stations, and Emily felt every eye in the room do the thing, the flick down and up the recalculation, and she heard from somewhere to her left, "Not quite quiet enough," a man's voice say, to another man's voice. "Oh, this is the internet one." "The what?" "The diner. The fat girl with the old guy. It's a stunt. Network's chasing clicks." Emily's face went hot. The old thing came up out of the well faster than it had in years, and her hand found the edge of her station and gripped it, and she thought, "I knew it. I knew it. I should have run." And she looked toward the audience risers, where they'd said her people could sit, and they weren't there yet. The doors weren't open yet. She was alone in this. She was completely, "Excuse me." Emily turned. It was the angry one, the one Priya had warned her about. National show lost in the finale here for blood. He was tall, and he had good forearms and a jaw like a snowplow, and he was walking straight at her, and Emily braced. "You're Carter." "Yes." "Marcus works your neighborhood," he said. "Line cook, Marcus Peña." Emily blinked. "Marcus comes into my..." "Oh, he's my cousin," the man said. "He came to Sunday dinner last week and would not shut up about a bowl of chicken and dumplings." He looked at her hard, and then he did something Emily did not expect. He put out his hand. "Tony Peña. Whatever those 2 clowns just said, I didn't hear it, but I can guess. Ignore them. Marcus doesn't get excited about anything, and he was excited, so..." He shook her hand once firm. "Good luck. Not too much luck. I want to win. But some." 8:14 a.m. and Emily Carter stood at her station, with her heart going like a hammer, and thought, okay. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. At 8:40, the audience doors opened. Emily didn't look. She'd told herself she wouldn't look, because if they weren't there, she couldn't afford to know it, not right now, not with the cameras about to roll. She looked. Front row, Walter Hodge in a suit. An actual suit. A suit that had not been worn since a funeral pressed with a tie. Next to him, Earl in a suit. Next to Earl, Carol and Fran in their church clothes. Mr. Alvarez in the good jacket. Ronnie, who had never in his life worn a collar in a collar. Danny, with her phone up already filming, and 3 of her followers beside her. And Daniel Brooks in the middle of all of them. And on Daniel's shoulders, Lily. Lily was holding a sign. She'd made it herself, you could see it, and this time she stopped. Where'd you learn this? My mother, ma'am. Your mother a chef? My mother cleaned offices, Emily said. At night. She cooked in the morning before she slept. She said if she couldn't give me much, she could give me full. The silver-haired judge looked at her for a long moment. She gave you more than full, the judge said, and moved on. And Emily stood there and did not understand until later that it was the first genuine compliment that woman had given all day. By 1 in the afternoon, there were 4 contestants left. Emily, Tony Pena, and the 2 men who'd called her the Internet one, both of whom it turned out could actually cook, which somehow made it worse. The final round was announced. 1 dish, the silver-haired judge said. Anything you want. This is the one that decides it. So make it the truest thing you know how to make. Don't make it fancy. Fancy's easy. Make it true. You've got 90 minutes. Your time starts now. 1:05 p.m. And Emily Carter stood at her station and looked at her ingredients, and her hands started to move before her brain caught up, because her hands knew. Her hands had always known, and Walter's voice was in her head, and Mr. Alvarez's voice was in her head, and she was not making red wine reduction. She was making chicken and dumplings. One of the men who'd called her the Internet one looked over, saw it, and laughed out loud. Comfort food, he said to his neighbor, not quiet. In the finale, she brought a church potluck to a knife fight. Emily's hands did not stop moving. She browned the chicken. She built the stock the way her mother built stock, from the bones up, patient, unhurried, the way you build anything that's meant to last. She rolled the dumplings by hand, because she had never once in her life used a machine for them, and she wasn't going to start with a camera watching. 1:40 p.m. 50 minutes gone, and Tony Pena at the next station leaned over and said low so the mics wouldn't get it. That smells like my grandmother's house. Yeah. He kept his eyes on his own dish. She's been gone 11 years. I haven't smelled that since. He swallowed. Cook Carter. Don't let me distract you, but cook. 2 p.m., and it was plated, and it was done, and it was the most naked thing Emily Carter had ever set in front of another human being, because it wasn't impressive, and it wasn't fancy, and it was just true. It was the truest thing she knew. It was the thing that had brought a starving child back to the table, and now it was sitting on a white plate under bad lights waiting to be scored by strangers. The judging went in reverse order. The 2 men went first. They were good. The judges said so. Technical. Precise. One of them had done something with a foam that made the silver-haired judge nod. Then Tony Pena, who had made his grandmother's mole, and who got very quiet when the silver-haired judge told him it was the best thing he'd cooked all day, and who said, I know, I don't cook it often. It hurts to cook it. And the judge said, the good ones always do. Then Emily. 2:15 p.m. The 3 judges tasted the chicken and dumplings. And nobody said anything. Emily stood at her station, with her hands folded, and waited to be told it was grandma food, church food, that she didn't belong here, that it was a stunt, that the network was chasing clicks. The silver-haired judge set down her spoon. She looked at the dumplings. Then she looked at Emily. I've been doing this 30 years, she said. I've eaten in every important restaurant in this country. I've been to France. I've been to Japan. I've had food that cost more than most people make in a month. She paused. And I'm sitting here trying to remember the last time a dish made me want to call my mother. The soundstage was silent. She's been dead 9 years, the judge said. And I want to call her, right now. Because of a bowl of chicken and dumplings made by a woman I met this morning." She looked at Emily, and her eyes were wet, and she was not a woman whose eyes got wet. Everyone in that room knew it. "How did you do that? How did you put my mother in a bowl of soup?" Emily Carter's voice came out in pieces. "I didn't put your mother in it, ma'am," she said. "I put mine. I just cooked the love. Somebody told me that. He said, don't cook the chicken, cook the love, and let them try to score it." The silver-haired judge picked up her spoon. She took a second bite. She didn't have to. The scoring was done. Everybody knew the scoring was done. You don't take a second bite when the scoring's done. She took a second bite anyway, and in the front row, an old steam fitter in a funeral suit put his weathered hand over his eyes, and a 6-year-old on her father's shoulders held a purple sign up as high as her arms would go. And Emily Carter stood on a soundstage under the worst lights she'd ever felt, and understood, finally all the way down, that she had not brought a church potluck to a knife fight. She'd brought the only weapon that had ever mattered, and she'd won the fight the second she stopped being ashamed to hold it. They announced it at 2:40, and the winning was almost the smallest part of the day. The silver-haired judge stood up, and she said the scores, and Emily Carter's name was first, and the number wasn't close. And the two men who'd called her the Internet one clapped because there were cameras on them, and Tony Pena clapped because he meant it. And up in the front row, an entire diner's worth of people who had shown up in funeral suits and church clothes came completely apart. Emily heard Lily first, a 6-year-old's voice cutting over everything, over the applause, over the music they'd started playing. "That's Emily. That's the dumpling lady. She's the best one I had a sign." And Emily Carter, standing on a soundstage holding a trophy she didn't remember being handed, looked up at that purple sign held high over a father's shoulders, and she laughed and she cried at the same time, which she had never done in her life, because she'd always believed you had to pick one. 2:42, and Priya Raghunathan found her backstage before she'd even put the trophy down. "Okay, Emily, listen to me. I can't hear anything, my ears are... That's adrenaline. It passes. Listen." Priya grabbed both her shoulders. "In about 6 hours this airs, and when it airs your whole life changes. I need you to hear me say that so it doesn't hit you cold. Your whole life changes tonight. I have a diner to open at 5 in the morning." Priya stared at her. "Emily," she said. "Sweetheart, you are not going to have a normal 5 a.m. ever again." Emily didn't understand it. Not then. She drove home with the trophy in the passenger seat because it wouldn't fit in the trunk, and she got 4 hours of sleep, and at 4:40 in the morning, she unlocked the front door of her diner, and the lock stuck, and she jiggled the key twice, and leaned her shoulder in, and it gave. "Morning, Bess," she said to the coffee urn. And then she turned on the lights, and she looked out the front window, and she stopped breathing. There was a line. 4:41 in the morning. Black, dark February cold. And there was a line down the block, and around the corner, and out of sight. Emily stood in her own doorway with her keys in her hand, and could not move. She counted. She couldn't help it. It was the job she counted. She got to 60 before the line bent around the corner, and she lost it. Her phone was buzzing. It had been buzzing. She'd turned it face down at midnight, and it had not stopped buzzing since. She picked it up. 2,040 missed notifications. Walter's video was at 4 million. The show's clip of her final dish was at 11 million. Priya had texted at 2 a.m. told you. Then, at 3, are you seeing this? Then at 4. Emily, answer your phone. There was a knock on the glass. Emily's heart stopped. She turned around, braced for the old thing, braced for a camera, braced for a stranger who wanted a picture with the meme lady. It was Daniel. He was standing on the other side of the glass in his work coat, with 2 travel mugs in his hands, and behind him, the line, and he looked at her through the glass with an expression she couldn't read, and she unlocked the door, and he came in and handed her a mug. "Where'd you... Gas station. Yours is terrible, but it's hot." He looked past her at the empty diner, then out at the line. "You seen it? Daniel, there's..." Emily's voice broke. "There's 60 people out there. It's 4 in the morning. It's February. There's a man out there in a bathrobe. Daniel, he's got a bathrobe on over his clothes. I know. I parked behind him. What do I do? You open, Daniel said. Same as every morning. There's 60. Then you cook for 60. Emily. He put his hand flat on the counter. You cooked for 6,000 yesterday, on television. You can cook breakfast. 4:45 and Emily Carter stood in her own kitchen and could not make her hands move. And the panic came up out of the well. The whole thing all at once. The biggest it had ever been. Because for 29 years the fear had been, they'll see me and they'll judge me. And now 60 people were about to walk in and see her. And she didn't know how to be seen by people who were happy to see her. She had no practice. She had no callus for it. It was a wound in a place she'd never been cut before. I can't, she whispered. Daniel, I can't. I don't know how to... The door opened. It wasn't unlocked. She hadn't unlocked it. But it opened because Ronnie had a key, and Ronnie came in at 4:46 in the morning in his collar from yesterday, because he'd slept in it. And behind Ronnie came Danny, and behind Danny came Carol and Fran in aprons they'd brought from home. And behind them came Marcus Pena, the line cook on his day off again, who took one look at the ticket situation about to unfold and started rolling up his sleeves before he'd said a word. You called them, Emily said to Daniel. I called Ronnie. Ronnie called everybody else. I don't have staff. I can't pay. Nobody asked to be paid, Ronnie said, tying his apron. Where do you want me? 4:47, and Walter Hodge came through the door in his funeral suit because it was the nicest thing he owned, and he'd decided this was an occasion, and he walked past the whole scramble and sat down at the counter in his spot and said, Coffee's late. And Emily Carter laughed so hard she had to put both hands on the flat top to hold herself up, and the laugh turned into a sob and back into a laugh, and Walter Hodge sat there in his funeral suit and let her have it. And then he said gently, Fire's on 10, kid. You want it on 4. She turned the fire down to 4, and she opened the doors. The first man in was the one in the bathrobe. He was maybe 70. He'd been in line since 3:30. He sat down at the counter, and Emily said, What can I get you? And the man opened his mouth, and nothing came out, and he tried again, and his voice cracked, and he said, My wife watched you last night, on the show. She's got the cancer. She's been in the bed 4 months, she don't eat, nothing tastes right to her, the chemo took it all. He put his hands flat on the counter. And she watched you cook them dumplings, and she looked at me, and she said, Harold, I want that. First thing she's wanted in 4 months. He looked up and his eyes were streaming, and he wasn't ashamed of it. Can I get some of them dumplings to go for my wife? 4:53 in the morning. Emily Carter stood behind her counter and looked at a man in a bathrobe who had stood in the February cold since 3:30 in the morning, so his dying wife could taste something. They take an hour, she said. The dumplings. To do it right. Harold's face fell. So you're going to sit right there, Emily said. And I'm going to get you a coffee and some eggs, so you don't wait on an empty stomach. And in 1 hour, I'm going to hand you the best bowl of chicken and dumplings I know how to make. And it's going to be hot when it gets to her, because I'm going to pack it in a way that keeps it hot, and there's no charge. And don't you argue with me, Harold. I've had a very long day, and I'll win. Harold put his face in his hands and cried at her counter. And Walter Hodge, 2 stools down, reached over and put his hand on the man's back and said, She does this to everybody. You get used to it. You never get used to it. 5:30, and the diner was full, and the line was still out the door, and Emily was moving the way she'd always moved, fast and light and quiet, except now there were 5 other people moving with her, and none of them knew the kitchen the way she did, so she was calling it like a captain behind corner hot pan. Ronnie. No, that's 4, not 10. Danny, those go to the window. Marcus, you're a saint. Carol, honey, the coffee. And it was chaos, and it was the most alive that building had been in 50 years. 6:15, and a woman at table 4, mid-30s plus size, sat alone in the corner and didn't order. Emily noticed. Emily always noticed. She came over. What can I get you, hun? The woman looked up, and Emily saw it, saw the whole thing. Saw herself. Saw the way the woman was sitting small, the way she'd taken the corner table, the way her shoulders were up around her ears, like she was waiting to be laughed at. "I drove 3 hours," the woman said quietly. "From Rockford. I saw the show." She swallowed. I don't eat in restaurants. I don't like people watching me eat. I haven't eaten in a restaurant in 6 years." Her voice dropped. "But I saw you win, and I saw you smiling, and I thought maybe here." "You can eat here," Emily said. "I don't want anybody to. Nobody's watching you here." Emily crouched down the way she'd crouched down for Lily level, so the woman didn't have to look up. "You see that old man at the counter in the suit? He'd fistfight anybody who looked at you sideways. He's 78, and he'd lose, but he'd do it. You're safe here. I promise you. You're safe here. What do you want to eat?" The woman's eyes filled. "What you made on the show," she whispered. "I want the dumplings. I've been thinking about them since last night. I want to know what it feels like to eat something made with—" She couldn't finish it. "Made with love," Emily said. "Yeah, coming up. And you sit right there, and you take your time, and you don't rush a single bite, you hear me. You paid for 3 hours of driving. You earned a slow lunch." 6:40, and Emily was carrying the woman's dumplings out when the bell over the door rang, and Emily glanced up on instinct and stopped dead in the middle of her own floor. It was the man in the good coat. 6:41 in the morning, and the man who'd called her a walking advertisement. The man who'd told her she was hard to look at. The man who'd put 31 reviews on the internet was standing in the doorway of her packed diner in his $400 coat, and the whole room saw him, and the whole room went quiet, because half of them had been there that Friday, and they remembered. Walter Hodge started to stand up. "Walt," Emily said, "sit down." "Kid, sit down, Walter. I've got this." She set the dumplings in front of the woman from Rockford. Then she straightened up, and she wiped her hands on her apron, and she walked toward the man in the good coat, and every single person in that diner watched her do it. He looked terrible. Up close, he looked like he hadn't slept. He had his phone in his hand, and Emily's whole body braced for the camera for it to start again. "I'm not," he said. "I'm not here to—" He stopped. He tried again. "I saw the show." Emily didn't say anything. "Everybody saw the show," he said. "It's you're everywhere. My daughter saw it. My daughter's 22 and she goes to school downtown, and she called me last night and she said, 'Dad, isn't that the place you always go? Isn't that the lady?' And I said, 'Yeah.' And she was so excited, she was so proud that her dad ate at the place with the woman from the show." His voice cracked. "And then she said, 'You must be so nice to her, Dad. You go there all the time. You must know her.' And I—" He stopped. The diner was silent. "I couldn't tell her," the man said. "I couldn't tell my own daughter what I said to you. I couldn't say the words out loud to her. And that's when I—" He held up his phone. His hands were shaking. "I took them down. The reviews. All of them. It won't fix it. The internet doesn't work like that there already. But I took mine down. 31 of them. It took me all night to find them all under the different names. He put the phone in his pocket. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I know how that sounds showing up here after I know. I just needed to say it to your face, because I said the other thing to your face, and it wasn't right that the cruel thing got said to your face, and the sorry thing got said behind a screen." He looked at the floor. "That's all. I'll go. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." He turned to leave. 6:44 in the morning. "Sit down," Emily said. The man stopped. "There's a stool at the counter," Emily said. "Next to Walter. He won't like it. Sit down anyway. You want coffee?" The man turned around, and his face was destroyed. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to." Emily was already walking to get the pot. "That's the whole point of it, hon. Doing it when you don't have to. That's the only kind that counts." She poured him a cup. "Cream's on the counter. And you're gonna eat something because you look like hell. And nobody looks like hell in my diner without me feeding them. That's a rule. It's the only rule." The man in the good coat sat down next to Walter Hodge. Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then Walter said, "Cream's down by the sugar," and went back to his eggs. And that was the closest thing to a pardon the man was going to get from Walter Hodge. And somehow he understood that, and he took it, and he reached for the cream with a shaking hand. 6:50, and Emily brought Harold his dumplings packed hot in a double container with a towel around it, and Harold stood up to take it, and couldn't find his wallet. And Emily said no charge, and Harold said he couldn't. And Emily said, Harold, and Harold said, please let me do something. And Emily thought about it and said, you can come back. You can bring her when she's better. That's what you can do. You bring your wife in here when she's got her strength back and she sits at that counter and I make her the dumplings fresh and hot and she doesn't have to eat them out of a container in a sickbed. That's the price, Harold. Come back with your wife. That's what it costs. Harold Nelson. She learned his last name later when he did come back, when his wife did get her strength back, when she sat at that counter 8 months later and ate a fresh hot bowl of dumplings and held Emily's hand and couldn't speak. Harold Nelson stood in that diner at 6:50 in the morning, holding a container of soup for his dying wife, and nodded because his voice was gone, and walked out into the February dark to drive it home while it was hot. 7:15, and it hadn't slowed. It had gotten worse. The line was longer, and Priya Raghunathan called, and Emily answered with the phone jammed between her ear and her shoulder while she cracked eggs. Emily, are you sitting down? I have never once sat down in my life, Priya. What? Okay, so, the network wants to talk to you about a show. Emily cracked an egg. I did the show. Ah, your own show, Priya said. Emily, they want to give you a show. Cooking, but the real thing. The people, the diner, the way you are with people. They watched the footage of you talking to the judges and they said nobody's real like that anymore and they want... No, Emily said. Silence. Emily. No, thank you, but no. Emily cracked another egg. I've got a diner. I've got a line out the door. I've got a woman from Rockford eating in public for the first time in 6 years at table 4, and I'm not going to leave her to go stand under those lights again. This is the show, Priya. This right here. This is the only show I want. There was a long pause on the line. You know, Priya said slowly, in 11 years of doing this, you're the first person to ever say no to that. Yeah, well. Emily looked out at her packed diner, at Walter in his funeral suit, at the man in the good coat. Sitting hunched next to him, drinking coffee, he didn't deserve, and knew he didn't deserve, at Daniel. Bussing tables in his work coat because he'd taken the morning off and just started helping without being asked. At Lily because Daniel had brought Lily. It was a Saturday, and Lily was standing on a chair at the register, charging people the wrong amounts with total confidence, at the woman from Rockford, taking small, slow bites with her eyes closed. I already got everything the show was going to give me, Emily said. I got it a month ago. I just didn't know it yet. 7:40 and Emily hung up the phone, and Daniel came up to the counter with a bus tub on his hip, and he set it down, and he looked at her and he said, You said no to your own TV show. I did. Emily. That's people would kill for. Daniel. Emily wiped her hands. Can I tell you something I never told anybody? Yeah. When I was 9. Emily said, the kids threw my lunchbox in the garbage and gave me the name that stuck for 20 years. And I came home and my mother was asleep because she cleaned offices all night and I woke her up and I told her and I asked her. I asked her when it stops. When do people stop looking at you like that? And you know what she said? Daniel shook his head. She said, baby, it might not ever stop. Some people are going to look at you like that your whole life, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you different. Emily's eyes filled. And I said, then what do I do, Mama? And she said, you build a place. You build one place in this whole world where nobody looks at anybody like that. You can't fix the whole world, baby. But you can build one room. 7:41 in the morning. Emily Carter looked around her packed diner. I built the room, Daniel, she said. It took me 20 years, but I built it. Why would I leave it to go stand in a room full of the exact people my mother was warning me about? Daniel Brooks stood there with a bus tub on his hip and his eyes wet. Sarah would have liked you, he said. A lot. And from the register, Lily Brooks announced to a confused customer, that'll be $100. And Daniel closed his eyes, and Emily laughed, and the diner ran on around them, warm and loud and full. The one room in the whole world where nobody looked at anybody like that. The months that followed changed everything and nothing both at once, which is the only way real change ever comes. The line stayed. That was the part nobody predicted. Everyone assumed it was a wave, a thing that crests when the show airs and breaks and pulls back out to sea by spring. Priya said it. The reporters who came the first week said it. Even Daniel said it gently one morning in March that Emily should enjoy it while it lasted, because it wouldn't last. It lasted. By April, Emily had to do the thing she'd sworn for 3 years she'd never do, which was hire people, because a woman cannot cook for a line that never ends alone, no matter how fast and light and quiet she moves. And when she sat down to figure out who she didn't post an ad, she didn't call an agency. She hired Ronnie full-time and made him kitchen manager, and Ronnie cried, which Ronnie would deny to his grave. She hired Marcus Pena off the downtown line and paid him more than the fancy place had, and told him he'd never have to plate a foam again as long as he lived, and Marcus said that was the best job offer he'd ever gotten in his life. And then, one afternoon in April, a woman came in and sat at the corner table, the small one, and sat small in it, shoulders up, waiting to be laughed at, and Emily walked over and crouched down level with her and said, "What can I get you, hun?" It was the woman from Rockford. "I drove back," she said. "I've been driving back. Every couple weeks, 3 hours each way." She swallowed. "This is the only place I eat. In public. It's the only place." She looked up. "I quit my job, in Rockford. I've been thinking about it since the first time. I'm a decent cook, I'm not. I'm not you, but I'm decent. And I wondered." "When can you start?" Emily said. The woman's name was Grace, and she started that week. And on her first day, Emily watched a table of college kids come in, and one of them looked Grace up and down, and did the thing, the flick, the recalculation, and started to lean over to whisper to his friend. And Walter Hodge, 78, in his spot at the counter, said, without turning around loud enough for the whole room, "We don't do that here." The kid froze. "You want to eat? You eat," Walter said. "You want to judge? There's a door. It swings both ways. Your choice." The kid ate. He ate quietly. He tipped well. And Grace at the register put her hand on her chest and looked at Walter like he'd hung the moon, and Walter went back to his eggs like nothing had happened, because to Walter, nothing had. That was the day Emily understood that the room had learned to defend itself. She didn't have to be the one anymore. She'd been the one for so long, the one who absorbed it, the one who smiled and offered the to-go box, the one who apologized first because it was easier. And now there was a whole room full of people who'd watched a single dad stand up on a Friday afternoon and had decided one by one, without ever discussing it, that they'd never sit on their hands again. Kindness, it turned out, was contagious. It just needed one person to go first. By summer, the diner had a name people used in other neighborhoods. Not the name on the window. They called it the place where they don't judge you. Cab drivers knew it by that. People said it to each other in other parts of the city. If you're having a bad day, there's a place on the corner, the dumpling lady, they don't judge you there. You can eat in peace. Harold Nelson came back in June. He came back the way Emily had made him promise, and he didn't come alone. And the woman on his arm was thin and pale, and moving slow, and wearing a scarf over where her hair was coming back. And Harold walked her to the counter like she was made of glass and blown from gold. And he said, "Emily, this is Ruth. This is my wife." And Ruth Nelson, who had eaten chicken and dumplings out of a container in a sickbed in February, when nothing else in the world tasted like anything, sat down at Emily's counter and looked at her and couldn't speak, and reached out and took Emily's hand in both of hers and held it. And the two women sat there holding hands across the counter and not saying a single word, because there weren't any. There was no word for it. There has never been a word for it. Emily made her the dumplings fresh and hot. Ruth ate every bite. Slow, eyes closed, the way you're supposed to. And when she was done, she opened her eyes, and she said the only thing she said the whole visit. She said, "You brought me back, honey. When I was ready to go, you gave me a reason to want one more bite of something. And one more bite turned into one more day. You don't know what you did." She squeezed Emily's hand. "You'll never know what you did. Walter Hodge, 2 stools down, took off his glasses and cleaned them for a very long time. Daniel and Lily became the thing that wasn't a word either for a long time, because Emily didn't have the callus for that any more than she'd had it for being seen. He came in every morning. That never changed. 6:15 black coffee, the seat at the counter. But somewhere in the spring, it stopped being a man and his daughter visiting a diner, and it started being something else. Something neither of them said out loud, because saying it might break it, and they'd both had enough things break. It was Lily who said it because it's always the 6-year-old who says it. It was a Sunday in July. The diner was closed on Sundays now. Emily had finally, after 3 years and 1 television show, decided that a human being was allowed one day, and the 3 of them were in the empty diner because Emily was teaching Lily to make dumplings, which mostly meant Lily was making an enormous mess, and Emily was pretending the results were edible. And Lily, up to her elbows in flour, said out of nowhere, the way children detonate things, "Emily, are you going to be my new mom?" The kitchen went very still. Daniel at the counter put his coffee down. Emily crouched down, level flour on her hands, and looked at Lily. "Honey," she said carefully, "nobody's ever going to be your new mom. Your mom is your mom. She's always going to be your mom. Nobody gets to be that but her." Lily's face started to fall. "But," Emily said, "you can have more people who love you. There's no limit on that. You know how many people love you in this whole world? There's no number too big. Your mom loved you, your dad loves you. And I—" She stopped. "And you what?" Lily said. Emily looked up at Daniel. Daniel looked back at her, and he didn't say anything, and he didn't have to, because his whole face said it, the thing he'd been not saying since a rainy Tuesday in October. "And I love you too," Emily said quietly. "So much, baby. So much it scares me. You and your dad both." Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "So you don't have to be my new mom," she concluded. "You can just be Emily, and you love me, and you love Dad." "Lily," Daniel said. "You do," Lily said, rounding on him. "You look at her weird. You look at her the way Mom looked at you in the pictures." Daniel Brooks put his face in his hands, and Emily Carter crouched on the floor of her closed diner with flour on her hands, and a 6-year-old staring her down started to laugh, and the laugh had tears in it, and Daniel came around the counter and crouched down next to both of them, and Lily looked back and forth between the 2 adults she loved most in the world, and said with enormous satisfaction, "I knew it." Daniel married Emily the following spring. It was small. It was in the diner. Of course it was in the diner, where else would it be? They closed for a Saturday, which cost Emily more in guilt than money, and Walter Hodge walked her down the aisle, because when Emily had asked him months before in a shaking voice if he would, the old steam fitter had gone quiet for a long moment and then said, "Kid, I buried a wife and I never had a daughter, and I've been coming to your counter for 4 years, telling myself you were just the girl who fed me, and you were never just that. So, yeah, I'll walk you. I'd be, yeah." And that was the closest Walter Hodge ever came to saying he loved her, and it was more than enough. It was everything. Mr. Alvarez made the arroz con pollo, his wife's recipe, the one thing she made her whole life. He hadn't cooked it since she died. He told Emily he couldn't, it hurt too much the way the good ones always do. But he cooked it for Emily's wedding in Emily's kitchen with his own 2 82-year-old hands, and when Emily tasted it, she understood that he was giving her the most precious thing he had left, which was his wife's love, transferred from one kitchen to another. The way love moves, the way it's always moved, the only way it survives. Lily was the flower girl, and took the job so seriously she practiced for 3 weeks and cried when the day came because she was afraid she'd throw the petals wrong. And Emily crouched down level and said, "Baby, there's no wrong way to throw flowers at people who love you." And Lily thought about that and decided it was true, and threw them with wild abandon, and hit Walter Hodge directly in the face. And Walter Hodge laughed for the first time anyone could remember. The woman from Rockford, Grace, catered it alongside Marcus and Ronnie, and it was the best food anyone at that wedding had ever eaten, and every single person there knew it, and nobody was surprised. And the man in the good coat was there, because that was the thing about the room Emily built. That was the twist nobody saw coming. least of all Emily herself. The man in the good coat, his name was Michael. It turned out Michael Foss had come back the day after the show and sat next to Walter and drunk his coffee. And then he'd come back the next day and the next, and somewhere in the spring, he stopped being the man who'd said the cruel thing and started being a regular, a quiet one. A man working out something in himself that took a long time to work out. He never fully forgave himself. Emily could see that. Some men don't. But he showed up every day and he tipped like he was trying to buy back a piece of his own soul. One breakfast at a time. And once in April, Emily watched him stand up and tell a stranger who was mocking Grace to knock it off, watched him do the exact thing that had been done to him from the other side of it now. And Emily understood that this was the only kind of redemption that was real. Not the words, not the sorry, but the day you finally stand up for someone the way you once tore someone down. He gave a toast at the wedding. It was 3 sentences. His hands shook the whole time. He said, "I said the worst thing anyone ever said to Emily Carter to her face in her own place. And instead of throwing me out, she poured me a cup of coffee and told me to sit down." He had to stop. He got himself back. I've spent a year trying to become the kind of man who'd deserve that cup of coffee. I'm not there yet. But she's the reason I'm trying. To Emily. And the whole diner raised their glasses, and Michael Foss sat down next to Walter Hodge, and Walter, without looking at him, put a hand on his shoulder for exactly 1 second, and then took it away. And it was the second pardon Walter Hodge had ever granted in his life, and Michael knew what it cost and what it meant. The diner kept going. It's still going. It'll go long after everyone reading this is gone because Emily made sure of it. She started a program, a real one this time. Not a lie. Told to protect an old man's pride. An actual program where she took in young cooks who'd been laughed out of other kitchens. The ones told they didn't have the look. The ones too big, or too poor, or too strange, or too broken. The ones who cooked like they had something to prove because they did, because someone had spent their whole life telling them they were less. She taught them the way her mother taught her. Patient. Low heat. If you can't give them much, give them full. And every single one of them on their first day got the same speech. The one Emily had earned the hard way over 29 years. They're going to look at you a certain way sometimes. Out there. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it stops, because it might not. My mother told me that, and she was right. But in here in this room, nobody looks at anybody like that. This is the one room. You're safe in the one room. And someday, you're going to go build a room of your own, and somebody's going to be safe in yours, and that's how it spreads. That's the whole secret. That's the only thing I know. You can't fix the whole world, but you can build one room, and if enough of us build one room one at a time." She never finished the sentence out loud, because she didn't have to. They understood. They always understood. They were the ones who'd needed the room. They knew exactly what it was worth. Walter Hodge lived to be 83. He died the way he'd have wanted, which was in his sleep in his own bed with a full stomach, having eaten pot roast at Emily's counter the day before, because it was a Tuesday, and Mr. Alvarez had passed the year before, and Emily made the pot roast on Tuesdays now in his memory. And Walter had eaten 2 helpings and complained about both of them, and then told Emily on his way out the door in a voice she didn't think anything of at the time, and would remember for the rest of her life, "You did good, kid. You built the room. Your mother'd be proud. I'm proud. Don't let it go to your head." And then he'd tipped his cap and gone home and gone to sleep and not woken up. At his funeral, Emily catered it because of course she did. And she made chicken and dumplings because that was the thing that was true. And the Union Hall was full of old steam fitters who'd known Walter 50 years, and one of them found Emily by the coffee and said, "You're the diner girl. He talked about you all the time. Last 4 years it was Emily this, Emily that. We thought maybe he was, getting confused. An old man with a crush." The steam fitter shook his head. "But it wasn't that, was it?" "No," Emily said. "It wasn't that. What was it then?" Emily thought about it. "He was lonely," she said. "His wife died and his kids moved away and he was 74 years old and he was starving and I don't mean for food. And he walked into my diner on a bad hip and I made him a cup of coffee and I asked him about his day. That's all. That's the whole thing. I just asked him about his day. Her eyes filled. Nobody had asked him about his day in 6 years. The old steamfitter nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. That'll do it. That'll do it to a man. He looked at her. You know what he left you in the will. He didn't have much, but I don't want anything of Walter's. It's not money, the steamfitter said. It's a note. He left you a note. His lawyers got it. The old man's voice caught. He wrote it a while back, I guess. When he knew his heart was going and didn't tell any of us the stubborn old he wrote you a note and he left instructions that you were supposed to read it in the diner. At the counter. In his spot. He was very particular about that. Said it had to be his spot. Emily read the note the next morning at the counter in Walter's spot before she opened in the dark with the coffee urn and nobody else. It was short. Walter wasn't a man of many words. It said, Kid. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry to leave you with a mess of feelings you don't have time for during a breakfast rush. You never did have time for feelings. Neither did I. Two of a kind. I never told you why I kept coming back. It wasn't the coffee. The coffee's terrible, I've told you that for 4 years. It was that you saw me. Everybody else looked at an old man taking up a stool. You looked at me, and you saw a person, and you asked me about my day. 4 years, every day. You have no idea what that did for a man who thought his using days were over. You built a place where the invisible people get seen. That's the whole thing you did. And you did it because somebody made you invisible once. And instead of getting hard about it, you got soft, and softness like that is the rarest and toughest thing there is. And don't you ever let anybody tell you soft is weak. Soft is the strongest thing I ever saw. You're the strongest person I ever met, and I worked 41 years around steel. Take care of the room. Feed the lonely ones. Ask them about their day, and put the fire on 4. Walt. Emily Carter sat at her own counter in Walter Hodge's spot in the dark, and cried the way she'd learned finally over the years to let herself cry all the way. No 90-second limit. No welding. It shut. No, don't let them see it, because she'd learned the thing her mother never got to learn, which was that letting people see it isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a person can do, and it's the only thing that lets them in close enough to love you. Then she wiped her eyes with her apron, and she stood up, and she checked the fire. It was on 4. She'd never leave it anywhere else again. She opened the doors, and the line was there, the way it was always there now, in the cold, in the dark, in the first gray light of morning. The lonely ones, the hungry ones, the ones who'd been laughed at, and the ones who'd driven 3 hours, and the ones who just needed one room in the whole world where nobody would look at them a certain way. Emily Carter stood in her doorway and looked at all of them. Good morning, she said. Come in out of the cold, sit anywhere you like. And they did, because Emily Carter had learned the only lesson that ever mattered, the one it cost her 29 years and a lunchbox in the garbage, and a television trophy, and a good man's love, and an old steamfitter's last note to learn. The world will always notice your body first, but feed people with love. Stand up when it's hard, and build one room where the invisible are seen, and long after they've forgotten your face, they will remember to the end of their days exactly how you made them feel. That is what Emily Carter built on that corner in Chicago. That is what she left behind. And that is the only kind of beauty that has ever once in the whole history of the world actually lasted.